Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to my presentation on a large work that we did. It's 2 years data of working together with farmer processors. First of all, cultivating the varieties with farmer processors and then also processing them over 2 years. And here you see some of the impressions that were obtained during this work. The outline of my presentation is I will discuss the trial setup and the participant selection, then evaluation of food product quality by processors, the pairwise ranks, and then an important elicited food quality descriptor, and then suggestions for the W5 methodology that we are going to develop and is necessary. I will not summarize the whole article because it's quite a complex article, so I will mainly focus on the methods to where that can inform the WP5 methodology. So we had a varietal evaluation of promising clones in 2 states and 2 communities, and one in Imo state in Nigeria and one in Osun state in Nigeria, and each representing one will represent the Imo case, representing a case of little fermentation of Gari-Eba, and one with much fermentation. And as you see, we had the model trials where we used 3 champion processors, people very renowned in the community to be very good in processing. And we had the baby trials, and we also evaluated food products from those baby trials. And you see that in each stage you had 20 baby trials and 1 mother trial. And the evaluation of the baby trials was with each farmer, with each participant. So this was what's happening. We had the roots, the processing of the trials, the roots, and they were processed into food products of Gari's an intermediate product to make Eba. And we also did Fufu, that was only in Osun state. So how did we select the baby trial participants? A very important issue if you're talking about social inclusiveness. So we included participants in such a way that each local social group in which cassava growing and processing expertise existed was proportionally represented. And to include agronomic as well as processing knowledge, we selected people with hands-on experience in both cassava cultivation and processing of the crop into food products, that is farmer processors. Through this expertise-focused approach, we ended up with all but 1 woman participant. I see that it's double that information here. But, this strategy builds on early research showing preferred traits were similar for men and women, but women mentioned food and product-related traits more often than men, while men mentioned agronomics traits more often, clearly reflecting the gendered division of labor rather than any conflicting traits mentioned, and women were more precise in mentioning food quality related traits. So then the selection of the champion processors that worked on a mother trial. So we determined in a meeting organized with a random selection of village residents, we asked around who were known to be very good processors. And we ended up also with only women processors. And interestingly enough, 2 of those processors were immigrants from the South region, where they make all other kind of products as well. So we had the advantage of being able to make fufu products from two different fufu products, one turned on fire and one boiled and then in bain-marie and then pounded and again boiled. And it has to be highlighted that these processors, the immigrants, were chosen by the autochthon villagers as very good as champion processors. Then we evaluated a diverse set of varieties, also very important. We had commonly grown varieties in Nigeria, well represented, and then improved classic varieties from IITA and more recent NextGen clones that are the result of recent breeding efforts in the NextGen project. You see, we also added local varieties from the trial locations, and so we ended up with 23 varieties in Imo and 20 varieties in Osun, because the local trial varieties were not taken to the other trial. So this was the processing setup. You see that we did cassava roots, peeling, grating, wet fermentation, different fermentation lengths you can see, and also you have wet fermentation of 4 days, and in Imo there's none. And pressing in Osun is also half a day, and Imo it's 2 days. So you have different combinations, and we had 3 replications. So we had 3 processors processing all the varieties. And for the fufu, we had a similar situation where you have 2 types of fufu, and also 3 processors processing all the varieties. So now how we did pairwise ranking. So in varieties from the mother trials, we randomized those 20 and 23 varieties into batches of 5, because people cannot pairwise ranking with more than 5 varieties is a kind of issue. So we harvested in batches. For example, if we take Osun here, we harvested batch 1, and then after that batch 2, batch 3, and batch 4. And within each batch, people did pairwise ranking. And in the second year, these combinations were altered because it was again randomized. And if you have batches of 5 and 4 varieties, you can have for 5 varieties you have 10 combinations, as is shown here. So you have 10 moments where you compare varieties with farmers, and those pairwise comparisons, each time you can ask why is one better than the other, and that provides good opportunity to elicit trait descriptors. That's what we also did. So then to compare results, we did also scoring on the 5 varieties. Here you see Gari from 1 batch, and you see we did scoring and normal ranking, and we concluded that I'm not presenting that the scoring results are not really informative. Then we have the baby trials, where we did also pairwise ranking with each of the participants, and each field, baby trial field, had 5 varieties, and there are 3 of those 15 principal varieties, and then a local check added and a breeder's check. So you have also 5 varieties which you can pairwise rank. And then we made sure that all these 15 principal varieties were replicated 4 times among the total of 20 baby trial participants. So each baby trial participant has a different combination of 3 varieties from the 15, meaning that you have different combinations to evaluate over 2 years, as the randomization is different from year to year. Here you see how that goes. We did the pairwise ranking of clones on the fresh roots, the Gari and the Eba. So pairwise ranking of fresh roots by champion processors and farmer processors showed little differences. So on the roots, people could not really discern already which one was best for Gari or Eba. And when you went to Gari and Eba, it was much more pronounced, and we got much more good distinction, which can mean that either processors are not really well able to estimate food product quality, or breeders are well informed about how what kind of root quality processors want on the root itself. They might be informed about the root shape, and that they want high dry matter and certain other things. So that can also be a factor in that. And here you see what we did, like you compare all the combinations and then you ask why. This then, if you combine all that information, you can see which varieties did the best in each state, and the numbers, the higher numbers are better evaluated, and the highest 5 are put in green, and the worst ones are put in red. So you get a kind of quite a good distinction between good and bad varieties, but it also varies per product. So you have certain varieties that are very good for Gari, are not necessarily good for Fufu. And there's a difference of varieties liked in Imo and in Osun, so the different fermentation cultures that they represent. And here you can see that in a correspondence analysis, you see that at the left figure, everything that goes to the left is less light because it's associated with the lowest rank 5. And in the right figure is the opposite, where you have the lowest figures. The lowest light varieties also, in this case, to the right. And there, the circles show some similarities of varieties that are not liked in both cases, and in one case it is liked and not disliked in the other case. So if we compare now the color and functional properties of the Gari of those best and worst varieties, we came up with these differences that for example, in high fermentation environment of Osun, high swelling power, the best varieties have higher swelling power. So there are some differences, and there's one very major thing that was similar to both was all varieties that are good have lower redness in their Gari color spectrum. This is showing some of that, how that looks like. You see that the browning in Gari and in Eba, in this case, Eba is not liked, while a butterish, lighter color with the absence of red is liked. So conclusions and relevance for the development of a standard methodology for the evaluation of advanced clones with value chain actors. So that's work package 5 work. We see that scoring is very unreliable. We analyze that data and there's absolutely no statistical significance to it. And while doing the work, we saw also that people didn't know when to score variety 4 or 1, or so you get a lot of 3s. If you doubt, everything becomes 3. So that's quite clear. And pairwise ranking is more reliable than normal ranking. And then the model trial evaluation is statistically more informative, but a scalable version of the baby trial format is needed for representative verification with users. So we saw that the model trial, as it is more close to a station experiment, you see that it's statistically more informative. But we saw in the baby trials that there are similar patterns, but a lot more noise. Similar patterns came up. And we therefore think it's also necessary to make those baby trials, to scale them up and make them more informative by increasing numbers and increasing statistical power. So for word package 5, what can we take up from this exercise? I think is pairwise ranking of batches of not more than 5 varieties is recommended. And at this moment, a few 2 months ago, NRCRI has already done some word package 5 work, and they have adopted the same methodology because they also did that in this work that I just represented. So they did that again. Then the pairwise ranking can be extended from overall impression of root product to also specific characteristics that we have been identifying in all this survey work, all those characteristics that in discussion with word package 2, all those characteristics that have been seen suitable, all these characteristics that have been brought up can be evaluated there. The reduction of varieties can be achieved by a normal ranking of varieties in focus group discussion with community representative experienced users. It would be very important that we always talk to experienced users, and especially people should be experienced in farming and processing. If you have only processors, they might be biased towards only processing. So it would be a kind of helpful to include farmer processors. And then you also somehow take up the gender aspect, because you'll be sure you have a lot of women if you focus on processors. And if you also focus on farmers, you will have men as well there. But it's basically for the food product evaluation, it's really essential to look at women, because even if we take into account what men want, most of the men, like 85% of those men, sell their roots to processors. So looking at the roots from only a farmer's perspective would not be that informative. So the best and worst evaluated roots and food products of varieties should be analyzed for identified relevant parameters. That's what I already highlighted. And this is the work package 5 work plan for Nigeria and Cameroon. First, we have to have this general workshop that will be at the annual meeting, RTBfoods annual meeting, to come up with a good integrated protocol. So insights from this and other studies will be brought there together with Alexander and other people. We will develop a workable, good protocol for evaluation. At this moment, we have already prepared trials in 2 states to do processing evaluation with pharma processors and do consumer testing as well. So those trials are established in 2 states, and then we are also multiplying clones to bring to Cameroon. And all these clones are the outcome of the product advancement meeting. And important to say is that during the product advancement meeting, the results of this study and also of the RTBfoods studies have been taken into account. So varieties that came up as good for processing, those results have been taken along, and it has resulted, for example, in the selection of two specific NextGen new clones. So here, this is the end of my presentation. So this is the reference of the publication that you can look up to see more complete results. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Béla, for this clear presentation, and thanks for paving the way for Work Package 5. Actually, we really want this presentation to lead to an open discussion with the audience, with you on the next steps or particular point of attention to be considered for the adaptation or for the development of tools to help breeders to integrate the expectations of RTB consumers and RTB processors into the breeding pipeline. So
yeah, it will be very, very important. This is one study that we have the feedback from different studies to take all the best insights and merge them together.
True. And in Work Package 5, I think you are considering having a workshop, or let's say a discussion during the RTBfoods annual meeting to collect and to put together the different inputs from the different methods that you've been actually inventorying, because you've made an inventory during the last years. So thanks. So I've seen different questions in the chat, so I may start with the questions in the chat, and then I will open the floor for other questions. So there was a first question from Anrita, just a question of clarification. Was the ranking based on the 1 to 5 score scale? Or because she has seen a 9 and she's asking why there is a 9 if the score scale is 1 to 5.
Okay, the score, yeah, we didn't really use, or we calculated that means you have 5 products in a batch, and then you can give them either a 5, which is the best, and a 1 is the least. So it's really a scoring. But we didn't really work with that in the analysis. What we worked with is ranks. So you have 5 varieties in front of you, and then you take, each time you take 2 of them, they had all the combinations, and people said, always made the decision, well, this one is the best, this one is the best, and in the end you can do the overall ranking of the 5 based on those pairwise comparisons. And those ranks were used in the analysis.
Okay.
But I didn't know where she saw the 9, actually. The 9, is that maybe in the Bradley Terry thing? Is that in this slide? I don't, maybe, is that maybe here? These numbers are, these are statistical relative numbers, so they don't represent any ranks. This is really looking at all the possible combinations and which ones have been. So this is not a ranking in itself. It's an index.
Okay. There is another question from Michael. How well did the mother trials correspond to the baby trials? And could you do a few more mother trials instead?
Yeah, we saw that the mother and baby trials were quite similar for the food product evaluation, but we saw that in the baby trials there was quite a lot more noise. So you had a very good variety for Gari, and then for Eba it was very low or something. So there was a lot more noise there, but the two supported each other. But for example, if you looked at if you compared clones, you can then also you see similar patterns. But they are statistically at 2 weeks because it's only 1 year data. We did the mother trials, that's maybe not clear from the presentation, but we did the mother trials 2 year data, and the baby trial was only 1 year data. So we see it more as a kind of check, like do you see a similar tendency, and all those things that diverge from it is not that. We cannot take up, we cannot too many value on that, but that's why the conclusion is also that you need a larger scale to have more statistical power. But it's very important to if you do the mother trials and you do some other mother trials in different locations, you have all of the information, but it's really based on those locations only, and you want to see also how that takes effect in farmers' situations, where other factors come in, and how discernible are these differences under farmer conditions.
Relevant. A quick question from Michael as well. Did longer fermentation affect the product color in any way?
Longer fermentation did not necessarily give you more browning. It affects the color indeed, but it's not. No, I can say that it gives you a somehow different color, but what people are looking for is a shining color. It's really the absence of brown that is very important. But what we saw, for example, in relation to the two different cultures of fermentation, is that yield related parameters, so as Gari yield, dry matter content, and yield, were negatively related to the product quality. So the higher the yield of the varieties was, the lower the product quality was in a strongly fermented situation. But if you go now to the other side, where you have little fermentation, you see that it's nicely aligned. You see that higher dry matter varieties and higher yielding varieties and higher Gari yielding is associated with more high quality products. So this is, I think, is an important insight to take on.
Thank you. A question from Laura. So how has the work package 1 methodology influenced the approach, or are there elements from the work package 1 methodology that could be of use for work package 5 methodology? So that's a broad question, a general one, but really relevant.
Yeah, this work started actually before the RTBfoods work package 1 started. And well, not the end evaluation of this food products for the second year. At that time, the RTBfoods project was started, so there was not too much input from work package 1 to this methodology. But what we can say from the work package 1 methodology is that we might be more informed if we really are going to the work package 1 methodology. As I've been saying, these surveys, everything that has been elicited to be important, which characteristics are important for users, those ones can now be ranked on. So you can ask farmer processors not to rank on which one is the best and only which one variety is better than the other, which gives you just the overall evaluation, but then you can also go down into those specific characteristics that have been elicited during the work package 1 work, such as moldability, fineness of the grains, and all. So those things that, and especially those ones that we will be able to connect to work package 2, those parameters, we can rank them all as well. So instead of only asking what is the best and the worst, you go a step, after you have done that, you go a step further, and in relation to the color, what is the best and the worst, and what is relating to the moldability, what is the best and the worst. So that gives you some more clues on what is happening, on what is actually wrong with why one variety is better than the other. What is the determining trait there? Which one is the most important trait?
Yes, it's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
Dominique, do you want to ask your questions? You had 2 questions, one on double purpose cassava and one on G/E effect.
Yes, Béla, nice presentation. Could you tell us about the double purpose cassava for Gari-Eba? It seems that you have only Akpu, who is good for both. And also, what is the lesson learned between the IMO and Osum state for the same clone?
Yes, we have, indeed, there's a difference for Fufu. You see, for example, that for Fufu, some improved varieties from IITA are more suitable than they are for Gari, strangely enough. So there is probably, if you want to have the best Fufu and the best Gari in the world, you should have different pipelines. But then you have to also to realize that farmers, they want to make those products from the same variety, because they don't plan their work in the beginning of the year. They are saying, well, this part of my field is going to be for Gari, and this one is for my household Fufu consumption. So they really, that's what they have been in work package 1 as well. They have been addressing that, so that they want to make the same product, of to use to make different products from the same variety. The G/E effect for the different regions, I've been highlighting already, that you see in the situation where there's a less process, less fermentation involved. You see another very little different relations to dry matter and Gari yields and fresh yields. So it seems that for the case where there's a lot of fermentation, you have to have other varieties that are good for the best for Gari than in IMO. But it has to be highlighted that this is a first study, so this cannot be determinative. We have to have really further studies on those 2 extremes. That's why I proposed also within the breeding unit to make 2 kind of Fufus and 2 kind of Garis, a very fermented one and a non-fermented one, and to see how those products are evaluated for the different varieties. I think the process in the fermentation has a large influence on what varieties are acceptable or not. For example, the variety, there was one NextGen clone 1176 P002 that really showed a colored, very color browning in Osum state. And it also showed the texture problem in Fufu, color and texture problem in Fufu. Well, this doesn't come up that clearly in the IMO situation, where the variety was not very much liked, but also not very much disliked. So in that situation, you see that clear color issue doesn't come up. That's strong.
Okay, thank you. And the Kati clones in IMO with very bad landrace, is it good for Fufu, or why did they grow bad clones in their fields?
Let me see, the Kati is
In IMO.
Okay, yeah, IMO, okay. Gati Gati, I don't know. I know that Zigazoo, there was some varieties that were indeed not well appreciated for, this is Gari, for some products. Even some were not, I think it's Zigazoo, but I think Hugo can give me a better explanation. But there are some varieties that people cultivate and they know that it's not good for the food product, but they appreciate it very much for the very high yield. So what they do is they mix, for example, Zigazoo with another one that is very good for the food product, and then you get a reasonable or even high quality product.
Okay, thank you.
So and it has to be said that in IMO, people are stressing also yield a little bit more than in the Southwest from earlier research that we saw, because there's really scarcity of land in IMO. So people are really dependent on the small area they have to produce as much as possible. So that's why those conscious mixtures probably come up.
Thank you.
Any more question or feedback to be
You have in
shared
the
with
chat. You have
Béla?
more in the chat.
I see Michael says, NextGen clone you mentioned, that was more or less okay in IMO. This would be a GBE effect, perhaps either on mode of production or maturity of. Yeah, that's a point. We did also, they are not presented here. We have clear differences in soil, for example, and weather conditions in IMO and Osun state. And one important thing is we measured also the acidic, the soil's characteristics in IMO and Osun, the regular fertility parameters. And what you see is that there's a clear difference in acidity, where in IMO you see very acid soils like pH 4 to 5, while in the Southwest you have like 6 to 7, which means that in IMO state you have less nutrients available for the crop, because if you have an acid soil, you can have all the nutrients in your soil, but they will not be available for uptake in the plant. And you can also see that in IMO, the roots and the yield are significantly lower than in the Southwest. You see really a difference of about 50%, now 30% difference in yields. And so this is so it can be related to that, or it can be related to processing. That's a good point. But if you visit, I visited on both sides, and what you see, if you see the yields from the same varieties, you see different roots coming up, because you see that they are clearly smaller in IMO state.
Tessie, do you want to add something? Because you have done the IMO evaluation. Tessie?
Yes, I've not, because I'm in the presentation mode, I cannot see the participants.
Yeah, yes, she's there. Tessie? You are mute.
Tessie, okay, maybe the host can unmute her. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm asking her, but she's
Okay.
not answering.
Yeah, but the internet connection might be a problem. If it's raining over there or some other thing, then it's.
And there is a question from Elizabeth Park. How do you think that we will use this trial for the breeder? Because it's needs some adjustment, and how can the breeder can use this kind of trial for selection?
Well, we have been identifying some parameters that are important to look at within the breeding program. So we have, for example, this browning can be assessed in the late stage. Breeding populations, and if we do that and we relate it to the fresh root yields, and we can see, for example, that it's related to multiphenols or chloric acid things, then we can take it also up into earlier breeding stages. So that's one thing. The browning is one thing that clearly comes up. And another thing is indeed, like I've been saying, apparently the difference in fermentation can also be important to look at. But as Michael highlighted, this can also be a climatic thing. But then you could relate it also.
Hello? Hello? We lose you. Hello, Béla?
Hello? Yes, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, now yes. Eglantine?
Yeah,
Yes.
my computer says my internet is unstable, so it should be
Okay.
called. Now, I've been saying that there are clear what we have this browning that is coming up, and it has also, the color has been also coming up very strongly in the participatory processing activity 4 from RTBfoods, and also in the surveys. And we recently have analyzed the consumer testing, and we see that color is also majorly important in adoption. People highlight color as one reason to dislike or like a product. So I think that we can use that very clearly in breeding. So we have to develop those protocols to connect the cause of that. Well, we might not know the cause now, but at least we can, in the last breeding stages, we can evaluate the populations for this coloring. And for that, you need this kind of exercises, but you also need standardized protocols to make the Gari and Eba to really be able to compare very well the performances of the clones. Because this is very good to see what happens in farmer circumstances, and it's also very good to inform the food scientists on what is the best standard protocol to make your Gari and Fufu. So that's another thing.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the strategy for the next period? How you will work with Work Package 1 or Package 4 to develop a simple protocol for new clones evaluation? Because this one is very heavy, long. Maybe we need to simplify and to find the cheaper way to evaluate the clone. What is the plan?
Well, the plan is we have this first the formal discussion on with Work Package 2. Well, we had informal meetings with Work Package 2 on which traits to prioritize, to work on, to look into the physical chemical, connect to those characteristics identified to physical chemical properties. I think that color is one of them. Then we have these textual properties of Gari and Fufu. So there are those characteristics will be taken up and they will be evaluated, or for the last breeding population, the last stage breeding populations will be screened for those traits.
Mm-hmm. But outside Cassava, I think you need to work also on the development of a simple protocol for all the crop. And maybe
the protocol,
Work Package 1 and 5.
No, this we are not going to do this excessive work on all the. No, that's why I'm saying there should be, for example, these Work Package 5 trials. A lot of breeders, they propose like 12 clones or even 15 clones to be evaluated, which is a lot. If we advise to work on Paris ranking, then you have to go to lesser clones. And for that, there should be maybe a simple simple way of reducing, at least in an earlier stage, those clones, so that you don't have to do all this work for the complete clones evaluated in the trial. So I think it's not only the Word Package 5 protocol that should be there, but the Word Package 5 protocol should also include the standard laboratory preparation of the food products, to have the best representative way of preparing the food products, to be able to standardize that, to highlight further the differences. Okay. So that will be, that meeting should have taken place in June already, and that was planned, but of course of the COVID-19 this didn't happen. But during the annual meeting, we have to make a lot of progress, I think, on determining that. And it's not only on the field. It's very important that we do that on the field, and we identify the best and the worst. So in that sense, we really have to have, it's important to have in those trials contrasting clones, so at least including 2 or 3 local varieties that people like or dislike for any reason. And that can give you, in the end, if you work with processors, that can give you maybe 1 or 2 varieties that are very good and one that is clearly bad. And it's then important to go to the lab with those 2, because it's only in those extremes probably that you can see what the cause really is of that makes the one being appreciated and the other not. So you have that work, but then you need to do the same in the lab and make sure that lab work is representative of what happens in the field. So I think that's the most important, because then we can really inform breeding in concrete fashion, so to say.
Okay, thank you. Laura, Anna, Word Package 1, Word Package 4, do you want to integrate the discussion? Some things to add? Laura?
Yeah, it's good. It might be good to highlight that the time is probably, oh no, we have, it might be good to highlight the social aspects of this. And in Nigeria, we have seen, for example, for cassava, that people, men and women, don't have really different traits that they prioritize. You can see that the difference in responses are really reflecting their role in the different roles that they have with relation to cassava work. And even then, if you compare the traits, you don't see conflicting traits. So we came out with this idea, like we have to really have expertise focused selection of participants, and then making also sure that you have all the social groups included. I think that's very important. You don't want to come into a community in Benue State and you have your trial, and then it's the five processors who are the wife of the governor also who are going to process, and then you have that. So you really have to know what kind of local social groups are existing. Like if you might go to Benue State and you see you have different ethnic groups in a community. So you really want to have them all kind of contributing to that work. And as if your focus if your product profile is focused on small scale cassava processors, it would not make sense to get mechanized farmers or processors in that exercise. But you have to work with the people in such a way that those people are representing the segment that you are focusing on. And what we know from Nigeria is that 90% are small scale farmers and processors. So for that for that product profile, which is food security, where you majorly Gari and Fufu is made of with some other fermented products like Ashaba, Asha and Lafun and so that kind of. So those people have to be included, and that's very important, I think. And then for the gender aspects, like I say, there's no difference between men and women, but you will be working with women anyhow because they have such a major role in the processing. And in some stage, you see that is, for example, Banyu, you see that men are a little bit more cooperating within the processing than in other. That will be reflected if you make your choice that you have also some male processors represented. But it's important that we are working with the people that we are focusing on. And for another pipeline for industry, you really want to work with those large farmers and people who have processing factories, because then other things might come. They use the roots for other things, like the starch industry.
Okay. One last.
But for other countries, that might be the gender issue might be very different. You might see that women and men have really contrasting things that they focus on. Then you have to make sure that you do the evaluation for both, and that you have women and men participating. But also in that sense, it's just very important not to just bring in women because they are women. They should have the expertise, because we really should align with the expertise the people have.
Thank you, Béla. Thanks a lot.
I see a comment on this browning. I understood also, I think in Cameroon somebody is working on this, on to look at the browning in cassava and what the cause is. So I think Emmanuel Alamou from IITA is also in communication. Who is the person who worked? I cannot. It's Gerard, I think. Not Gerard. Anyhow, they are working on that. So we will have a good.
And in Côte d'Ivoire as well.
They're also working on browning there.
Yeah.
For cassava, yeah.
For yam, it's for yam.
Oh, for yam, yeah.
Didier Mbege in Cameroon is working on browning.
Okay, yeah, that's the word. That's the name. Yeah.
Thank you, Béla.
Thanks a lot.
So, yeah, you're welcome.
You wanted to add something, Béla?
No, I think I have said enough.
You said a lot, actually.
Very good, very good. Thank you.
So thank you. I think time is over. And so thanks a lot for this very insightful presentation. It's a long-term work supported by different successive and complementary programs or projects. And the discussion is ongoing for sure. So, and as you mentioned, there is a lot to be investigated, different steps to be considered, not only at the field level, but also at lab level. And there is the social and gender dimension, which is another thing to be considered. And hopefully the discussion will be organized and will be able to take place during the annual meeting in Côte d'Ivoire in February.
Yeah, so, and it's also true, we are looking at breeding work, which has we are looking at long-term breeding work, and we are now just maybe for 2 years looking at food quality. So those initial results should not be taken up to decide directly on whole breeding populations. That's something I want to highlight. We have to work towards a symmetry and focus on food quality evaluation and breeding on a longer term.
True. So for all of you who would be willing to be involved in the development of such a methodology to inform breeders on how to integrate the expectations of RTB consumers and processors into the breeding pipelines, we actually encourage you to get in touch with Work Package 5 leaders RTBfoods Work Package 5 leaders. So there is Béla, you are one of the co-leaders. It is currently led by Yolene Swanket from SIP. Alexandre Bougnol from CIRAD is involved. And we have, of course, Gérard Ngo from Carbab Cameroon involved as well. So all of you are actually the ones leading this work package for RTBfoods. So hopefully we'll have this discussion during the annual meeting. So thanks a lot for those of you who joined today. We will meet next week, just before Christmas leaves for most of you, most of us. So next week, we will have a presentation from Christian Mestre, CIRAD Montpellier, who will be presenting the impact of pectin and starch on cassava and yam cooking ability. So it will be a really work package 2 presentation on new method development to understand the ability, the cooking ability of cassava and yam roots and tubers. So the impact of pectin mainly and starch, because this method is being developed at CIRAD. So we meet next week, not in 2 weeks' time, but next week on Friday, same time and same place on Zoom. Thanks a lot and have a nice weekend, everybody.